Okay, ready for this one? Well, the Big 12 take in some ACC teams and what amounts to a blockbuster trade. Can I interest you in a blockbuster Big 12 ACC trade? This one got a lot of people fired up online on Twitter. So we'll see what it does here. Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Do not be shy. There was a lot of talk there for a minute about the ACC and the Big 12, with the assumption being, hey, ACC is ticking time bomb. It's going to implode at some point. And then the Big 12 can take Louisville, Pitt, teams from that tier. And that was a pretty common talking point thought for a while. Now, I mean, I guess that's really still there, but we've pushed that timeline off because with the settlement, looks like that would be 2030-ish at the earliest. Hell, we even had, if you're talking about Big 12 ACC, I mean, this was literally, we're speaking of 1-year anniversaries. We're getting close to the 1-year anniversary of Ross Dellinger revealing that he thought that the Big 12 and ACC had been talking a little bit. The Big 12 and Florida State Clemson had been talking a little bit. That was right around this time last year when that's where we were. So you want to know how much things can change in a year. That's where we were. That was the big story. Florida State and Clemson trying to force their way out. We had the storyline for like a week or two of, well, could the Big 12 be kind of like a last-ditch option for them if they had to? Obviously, does not look at all like that is going to happen right now. The ACC settlement kind of locked things in for the next 5 years or so. But hey, Stuart Mandel from The Athletic, polarizing figure around here. But Stuart Mandel is keeping that story going just in a different way. So let me show you this tweet from him. It came from his mailbag. So it's actually, I shouldn't pin this all on Stuart Mandel. It was not he who suggested this. It was one of his readers. He says, hey, Stu, what if the ACC and Big 12 made a trade? All right. So there's the blockbuster trade. You guys ready for the trade? Cincinnati, West Virginia, and UCF to the ACC. Stanford, Cal, and SMU to the Big 12. Who says no? And Stu says, makes way too much sense. Stanford and Cal get to reunite with the Four Corners, plus frequent non-con foe BYU. SMU gets back natural rival TCU and former Southwest Conference teams, Baylor, Texas Tech, and Houston. Then on the flip side, Cincinnati and West Virginia, they used to be in the Big East with Pitt, Syracuse, Louisville, Boston College. And UCF, instead of having to go to Stillwater and Ames, can go to Tallahassee and Miami. Who says no? All right. Now, I'm not going to lie. There is a little bit of something to that, right? I mean, I'm not going to say that that's like a totally terrible comp or scenario all the way across the board because, I mean, for one thing, I know it was a big deal last year when UCF got to go play Florida. So if all of a sudden you're getting to play Florida State and Miami on the reg, I know that would be exciting. I don't know how well it would go. UCF, has a ways to go to be competitive, as we saw from last year against, an okay Florida team, but they were not very competitive there. Cincinnati, old rivals, less travel. That makes sense. I get that. West Virginia, for a long time, there's a lot of talk about the ACC. And I think from West Virginia travel standpoint, not just monetarily speaking, how much you could save on travel, but there's a clear travel burden for West Virginia. I think it makes it tougher in all their sports to be successful because you got to travel more and that wears on your body. And it makes life a little bit more difficult. So there are some merits to that, right? And, then looking at it from the other side, hey, Stanford and Cal not having to travel all the way out to the Atlantic coast, getting to stop halfway and then have some of their old Pac-12 foes back into it. That would ease some of the burden on them. But man, I can't get behind this if for no other reason than like Cal and Stanford do not, obviously the cultural differences people will point out, but to me, what's more important is like they don't have the same level of investment in football and men's basketball right now that what the Big 12 does. Like we opened the show tonight talking about Texas Tech, who is just shaking everything up by relentlessly using everything they've got resource-wise to go pursue number one recruiting classes, top-ranked prospects, all of these things. Totally shifting the culture there in the state of Texas and ruffling feathers doing it. That is not what Cal and Stanford are doing. They also do not have fan bases that are big or that care. Shout out to the Calgorithm. I shouldn't be so critical of Cal fans. They were very funny on the internet last year. I do appreciate that. I have been to a Stanford game that Stanford had a great team. They played K-State. There were like 1,000 people in the stands for a night game at the beginning of the year. It was like a Friday night game on Fox. Nobody was there. I need fan bases that care. I need schools that are all in. Brett Yormark is talking about we've got to bet on ourselves with this 5+11 playoff thing. I need schools that are all in. Now, SMU is kind of the total opposite. They are all in. So much so that they're taking no payment from the conference for a while, right? So they are. But SMU, I think, is a little redundant for the Big 12 being in DFW. I'm not sure that negates some of how much of a win it would be to have SMU in the conference, even if they are going to compete at a high level like they did last year. SMU's value goes up exponentially to a conference that does not have a foothold in the state of Texas. So it's a little less valuable for the Big 12, and it makes TCU a little less valuable because I think that hurts TCU a bit from just a talent acquisition standpoint, having somebody else in their metro area that would be in the conference. So, I don't think it fits for a lot of reasons there. I mean, Cal and Stanford they're not consistently playing good enough football or men's basketball to really, it just feels like dead weight. It feels like a lot of dead weight. Again, Cal, maybe not totally fair for Cal. Maybe not totally fair for Cal. But if we're talking about the last 10 to 15 years, I think that is a more fair statement there. So I have my doubts about where exactly that would go. There's just not a lot of upside in Cal Stanford. Of course, Cal Stanford, they would never stoop themselves to being in the Big 12, which is, to make a counterpoint to myself, really the only reason I would kind of want to see it. Imagine having to watch Cal and Stanford squirm being in the same conference as K-State, Iowa State, Texas Tech, all these schools that they would thumb their nose at, and having to make road trips to all those towns to play football games. Like that would be very entertaining. Maybe I shouldn't have even used football games to be like, sending the Stanford swim and dive team, right? They would hate it. And that would be very entertaining and funny. But all in all, no, I don't really want this. And man, it was like a visceral reaction from everybody on Twitter. Nobody wanted it. Not at all. I'm trying to see here. Not getting a stronger reaction, I would say, in the YouTube chat tonight. Anyway, well, here we go. Browns and Beers. Browns and Beers says no on the trade from this West Virginia fan. The ACC would be nice for the rivalries, but the Big 12 towns I've been to felt like Morgantown without the hills. It's funny you say that, Browns and Beers, because I tell people all the time, I'm like, Morgantown was my favorite trip I had 10 years, covered K-State, every road game I went to. And my favorite trip was Morgantown, West Virginia, because it was so unique because of the hills. I was like, this is a great college town, great tailgate scene, but it's got this really interesting landscape, topography. Like it just, completely unique from anywhere that else I was going in the Big 12. And so you're right. It is very similar in terms of how the people care. Great tailgating, great stadium, great environment. But yeah, very different in terms of the geography there. So I'm glad to hear that. Browns and Beers. Glad to hear that. Plus, look, guys, I mentioned SMU Twitter earlier. You guys want SMU Twitter? You want to welcome that into the conference? Have fun with that. So anyway, look, that's a very July topic, but it was a good one. I'll say that. As much as people were kind of crapping on the deal, like, hey, I would never do that. I don't want that. That's a good, interesting hypothetical. That's how you do July content. All right. From one content creator to another. Stuart Mandel and your reader, I forget the guy's name. He was from Columbus, Ohio. Andy to Andy J from Columbus, Ohio. Great job. Great job producing July content when we're all desperately looking for it.